Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. I know you guys are as interested as I am in the UN's Agenda 2030. It's a big topic. But today we're going to be looking at the agenda from a, a unique perspective, I guess you could say.
A little out there, you could say.
Yeah, a little esoteric even. So we've got these three transcripts, right, from YouTube videos.
That's right.
And the videos are hypnotherapy sessions where people are discussing their visions of Agenda 2030. So we're going to try to decode symbolic visions and look at future predictions, all that kind of wild stuff.
It's fascinating material. Each person had like really unique insights, but there are these common threads woven throughout these sessions.
Yeah, and I think the first thing that jumps out at me is how all three of these subjects view Agenda 2030 as something much bigger than just, sustainable development goals, right? Like they sense a deeper, maybe even a hidden agenda at play. It's like there's more beneath the surface.
Like take Karina, for instance. She describes Agenda 2030 as a worm-eaten apple, beautiful on the outside, but rotten at its core.
Yeah, that's a very powerful image, right?
Yeah.
And it suggests that things might not be as they seem.
It really makes you wonder, what the consequences could be.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then you've got Valeria's perspective, which adds another layer to all this. She sees Agenda 2030 as like a controlling system that's designed to restrict human freedom.
Right, and limit the flow of, and this is where the esoteric language comes in, new energies.
Whoa.
Yeah. So how you interpret that new energies is open for debate.
Sure.
But it definitely implies a sense of restriction and control.
Okay, so we're not just talking about environmental sustainability anymore. We're talking about like, maybe control of human potential or even spiritual growth.
Potentially, yeah.
This is getting deep, man. What about the third subject, Katerina? Does she share this perspective?
Katerina echoes this concern about control, but through a different lens. She emphasizes technology over nature, suggesting this shift towards artificial systems.
So if we connect that to the bigger picture here, it raises questions about individual autonomy in a world that's becoming increasingly technologically driven, right?
Exactly.
So across the board here, we're seeing this idea of a hidden agenda.
Right.
We're seeing a move towards control. And we're also seeing this emphasis on technology, right?
Yeah.
It makes you wonder who might be orchestrating all of this.
Yeah, it's like everyone's pointing in a different direction, which makes it even more intriguing.
Right.
Like Karina, for instance, points to global corporations and this like shadowy governing body as the current power holders.
Okay, so we've got big business, we've got powerful elites.
Yeah.
Kind of a familiar narrative there. But she also envisions a shift in power towards a more people-centric system by 2030. So it's interesting that she sees a potential for positive change within this system.
Yeah, but then you have Valeria, who presents a very different picture.
Okay.
She describes a powerful, controlling force, symbolized by the devil card, suggesting a more malevolent force is at play.
Whoa. Okay, that's some strong imagery right there. It definitely leans into maybe a more conspiratorial worldview.
Does.
But, hey, let's hear her out.
Yeah, and she even sees Trump as a figurehead.
Oh, wow.
In the initial implementation phase of this system.
Okay.
Now, whether you agree with her political interpretation or not,
of course,
it's a stark contrast to Karina's vision of a more people-centric future.
Absolutely. It's like we're looking at two sides of the same coin here. Now, what about Katerina? Does she offer a third perspective on these, powers that be?
Katerina adds an even more esoteric layer, suggesting that intergalactic beings are involved.
Whoa, okay. All right, now we're really going out there.
Now, this might sound far-fetched to some.
Sure.
But it speaks to this belief that forces beyond our immediate understanding might be influencing events on Earth.
Okay, interesting, yeah.
And like Karina, she also foresees a shift towards a more balanced interaction with these forces in the future.
Okay, so we've got corporations, we've got elites, we've got a devil card figure, and now we have intergalactic beings.
It's a mixed bag.
Right. It's a real mixed bag of potential players here, and it's fascinating how each session brings this unique perspective to this idea of a hidden agenda, right?
It really does. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle with some very unusual pieces.
Right.
It really highlights the complexity of this topic and the different ways people interpret these larger forces.
Okay, so we've got this sense of a hidden agenda. We've got a complex web of potential players.
Yeah.
Now let's see how this plays out in relation to one of Agenda 2030's key goals,
Okay.
and that is eradicating poverty and hunger. And this is where we start to see a real disconnect between the stated goals and the visions that emerge under hypnosis.
What's fascinating here is that while all three subjects see Agenda 2030 tackling poverty and hunger,
Right.
their visions paint a picture that's um, far more complex and frankly disturbing than simply providing food and resources to those in need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Karina, for example, predicts a significant decrease in population by 2030. And,
Yeah.
and she sees this happening through things like conflict, engineered famine, and even what she calls a fashionable illness.
Chilling thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
It begs the question, is the goal of Agenda 2030 truly to eradicate poverty? Or could it be about controlling population growth through potentially drastic measures?
That's a very, very good question, right? Like, what is the actual goal here? What about Valeria? Does her vision align with this idea of population control?
In a way, yes. Valeria paints this picture of a society where people stand in long lines to receive necessities from automated dispensers.
Like a scene straight out of a dystopian sci-fi film.
Exactly. It makes you think about the potential loss of individual agency and self-sufficiency in such a system.
Yeah, like where's the incentive to work or innovate if your basic needs are met, but only through complete reliance on this system?
Yeah, it's a thought-provoking, if somewhat unsettling image.
Absolutely. And then we have Katerina, who sees poverty contained rather than eradicated.
Right.
She envisions people being relegated to, ghettoized areas, almost like a form of social engineering.
It's a far cry from the image of a world where poverty is truly eradicated, you know?
It really is. And it raises questions about the potential for increased social stratification and control under Agenda 2030.
If we're just moving poverty around instead of addressing its root causes,
Right.
what does that say about the true intentions of this agenda?
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. It makes you wonder if the vision of a poverty-free world is even truly achievable, or if it's just, a utopian ideal that masks a more complex and potentially troubling reality.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's one we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into these hypnotherapy sessions and their insights into Agenda 2030.
Absolutely. All right. So far, we've uncovered some pretty thought-provoking insights about Agenda 2030. The hypnotherapy subjects all seem to agree that there's more to this agenda than meets the eye, but their visions of how this actually all plays out are quite diverse. So now let's shift our focus to health and well-being, another key pillar of Agenda 2030.
This is where we start to see some interesting contradictions between the agenda's stated goals and the subject's interpretation of those goals.
Okay.
Like, for example, Karina predicts a slower pace of life with less emphasis on material possessions.
Oh, okay.
This actually sounds pretty appealing, right? Less stress, more time for self-care.
Yeah, it does sound kind of idyllic, like a return to a simpler way of life.
Uh-huh.
But there's got to be a catch, right?
Well, Karina also foresees a decline in natural birth rates. This raises questions about the long-term sustainability of human society if we're living longer, but having fewer children. What does that mean for the future?
It's a trade-off, for sure, and it makes you think about, what's driving this shift.
Right.
Is it a natural progression, or is there something more deliberate at play?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Now, Valeria's vision takes us in a very different direction.
Okay.
She describes a future where people are heavily reliant on technology for their health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a world where instead of going for a run in the park, you strap on a VR headset and simulate a workout.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds efficient,
Yeah,
but also a little sterile.
it does.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the potential consequences for both our physical and mental health. Are we becoming too disconnected from our bodies in the natural world?
It's a very valid concern, and it kind of ties into Katerina's vision, which is perhaps the most dystopian of the three. She sees healthcare being dominated by artificial systems, with natural approaches being dismissed or even demonized. It's a world where you're more likely to get a microchip implant than a herbal remedy.
Yeah.
Right. It sounds like we're trading our connection to nature for reliance on artificial systems.
Yeah.
And not just in terms of health, but across the board. It's a recurring theme in these hypnotherapy sessions.
Uh-huh.
And it's definitely something to think about.
It raises questions about the potential for these systems to be used for control and manipulation.
Right.
If we're completely reliant on technology for our health and well-being, who controls that technology?
Exactly. And what are their motives?
Right.
Let's move on to another important aspect of Agenda 2030.
Okay.
Education.
Right.
The goal here is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education for all. But again, the hypnotherapy sessions paint a picture that's far more nuanced and complex than simply providing access to education.
Karina predicts a shift towards digital and holographic learning environments. Imagine classrooms where instead of a teacher at the front of the room, you have a holographic projection delivering a lesson or learning pods where students are immersed in virtual reality simulations.
Okay.
It's a very different educational landscape than what we're used to.
It sounds futuristic and exciting,
It does.
but also a bit impersonal.
Yeah.
What happens to the human element of teaching and learning in such a system?
Right.
And what about the potential for bias or control over the information being disseminated?
Those are crucial questions, and Valeria echoes this concern about control.
Okay.
She senses a deliberate dumbing down of education, as if the goal is to create a more compliant and less critical thinking population.
It's like they're saying ignorance is bliss,
Mhm.
right? But is that really what's happening, or is this just one person's interpretation?
Right.
What does Katerina's vision tell us about the future of education?
Katerina initially observes this push towards uniformity and control in education.
Okay.
But interestingly, she sees this plan ultimately failing. She believes that people will instinctively resist this kind of rigid control and seek out more natural and individualized approaches to learning.
So there's hope for those who value independent thought and a more holistic approach to education.
Yeah.
It's interesting how each of these visions offers a slightly different take on the same theme, and it's up to us to discern which resonates most with our own understanding of the world.
Absolutely. And speaking of discernment, let's move on to another complex and often controversial aspect of Agenda 2030,
Okay.
gender equality.
All right, let's dive in.
This is where the hypnotherapy sessions offer some of the most diverse and thought-provoking interpretations.
Karina suggests an initial phase of allowing children to explore their gender identity, followed by a shift towards promoting gender neutrality.
Okay.
She even goes so far as to envision the potential creation of beings without distinct sexual characteristics.
It's a radical concept, isn't it?
It is.
It challenges our fundamental understanding of what it means to be human, to be male or female.
It does, and it makes you wonder what the implications would be for society, for relationships, for the future of the human race.
Exactly. And then we have Valeria, who gains a very different picture.
Okay.
She envisions a scenario where gender distinctions are completely erased, leading to a society of physically and emotionally neutral individuals.
Okay.
But in her vision, this isn't a positive development.
Right.
She sees it as a way to make people more easily controlled, more malleable, less likely to resist authority.
So it's not just about erasing gender distinctions, but potentially manipulating those distinctions
Right.
to serve a hidden agenda.
Uh-huh.
That's a chilling thought.
Yeah.
What about Katerina? Does she share this concern about manipulation?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Katerina observes a trend towards softening masculine traits, making men more compliant and susceptible to manipulation. At the same time, she sees women becoming more rigid and controlled.
Oh, wow.
It's a vision of gender equality gone awry, where instead of achieving balance, we end up with a society where both men and women are manipulated and controlled in different ways.
It's a complex and unsettling picture, isn't it? And it really highlights the importance of critical thinking and discernment when it comes to these issues. We need to be able to separate genuine efforts to promote equality from more insidious attempts to manipulate and control.
Absolutely. And this theme of control and manipulation is something we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into these hypnotherapy sessions and their insights into Agenda 2030.
Okay, let's move on to a topic that's front and center in today's world.
Okay.
Climate change.
What?
Agenda 2030 calls for urgent action to combat climate change. But as you might expect, these hypnotherapy sessions offer some intriguing and often skeptical perspectives on how this might play out.
Karina, for example, foresees the development of advanced weather manipulation technologies controlled by a global network.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a world where they can literally control the weather, create rain in drought-stricken areas, or divert hurricanes away from populated coastlines. It sounds like science fiction, but it's a technology that's already being developed.
So the question is, who controls this technology And for what purpose is it being used to mitigate climate change, or could it be a tool for control and manipulation?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And Valeria adds another layer to this by predicting the closure of certain territories due to climate shifts.
Okay.
Imagine entire regions being deemed uninhabitable and populations being forced to relocate.
It's a disturbing thought, and it makes you wonder if this could be used as a form of social engineering, a way to control populations and resources. It's definitely something to think about.
It is.
What about Katerina? Does she share this skepticism about the climate change narrative?
Katerina takes a completely different stance.
Hmm.
She views the climate change narrative as largely fabricated, a fear-mongering tactic driven by financial motives.
Oh, wow.
She sees it as a cover for large-scale environmental manipulation, but not in the way we might typically think.
It's interesting how each of these subjects offers such a radically different perspective on the same issue. It really highlights the importance of critical thinking and considering multiple viewpoints when it comes to something as complex and politically charged as climate change.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the larger theme of information control that we've been discussing throughout this deep dive.
Right.
Who are we trusting to give us accurate information?
Yeah.
And how can we discern truth from falsehood in a world where information is increasingly weaponized?
It's a challenge we all face, and it's something we'll continue to explore as we move into the final part of our deep dive into the esoteric interpretations of Agenda 2030.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, exploring everything from a hidden agenda to the potential for technology to kind of take over our lives.
It's a lot to process.
It is. We've also heard like some pretty wild interpretations from a devil card figure to, the involvement of intergalactic beings.
Right.
So as we wrap things up here, I'm wondering how we can even begin to make sense of all of this, Well, I think it's important to remember that these hypnotherapy sessions offer glimpses into, possible futures, not definitive predictions.
Right.
They're meant to provide food for thought.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't take them literally or let them fuel unnecessary anxiety.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the fear and the speculation, especially when we're dealing with, topics as complex and potentially impactful as Agenda 2030.
Right.
So how can we approach the information in a balanced and constructive way?
One key takeaway for me is the importance of discernment.
Okay.
These sessions highlight the need to question assumptions, to look beyond the surface level narratives and cultivate a deeper understanding of the forces that are shaping our world. We need to be critical thinkers and not just blindly accept whatever information is given to us.
It's like we need to develop a stronger, BS detector in this age of information overload and all these competing narratives, right?
Absolutely. And that leads to another important point, the role of technology.
Right.
We've seen how technology can be a powerful tool for both good and bad.
Right.
It has the potential to improve our lives in countless ways.
Of course.
But it also carries the risk of being used for control and manipulation.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. So how can we ensure that technology serves humanity rather than the other way around?
That's a question we all need to be grappling with.
Right.
I think we need to be aware of the potential pitfalls of technology, but also embrace its possibilities for positive change.
Right.
We need to be proactive in shaping how technology is developed and used, ensuring that it aligns with our values and our aspirations for a better future.
So it's not about rejecting technology altogether. It's about being, conscious and responsible in how we interact with it.
Exactly.
It's about using technology as a tool to empower ourselves and create the world that we want to live in.
Precisely. And this brings us to another important theme that emerges from these hypnotherapy sessions.
Yeah.
The potential for a shift in consciousness. Karina, in particular, sees a future where people are less focused on material gain and more attuned to their inner world and their connection to nature.
Yeah, it's a hopeful vision, isn't it?
It is.
A move away from the current, materialistic, consumer-driven paradigm towards something more balanced and sustainable.
It is, but it also raises the question of, how this shift might be facilitated or even manipulated.
Right.
Is this a natural evolution of consciousness?
Yeah.
Or could there be, external forces attempting to steer this shift in a particular direction?
Right. It makes you think about the potential for both positive and negative influences on this shift in consciousness.
Absolutely.
And it reinforces the need for discernment, for being able to distinguish between authentic spiritual growth and external manipulations designed to control or exploit our consciousness.
Right. And that leads to a final crucial point, the importance of individual empowerment.
Okay.
These sessions, despite their differences, all seem to point to a future where individual choices and actions will have a profound impact on the world that we create.
Mm.
It's a reminder that we're not just passive observers in this unfolding drama. We are active participants who have the power to shape the future.
So it's not about waiting for some external force to save us or to fix the world.
Right.
It's about taking responsibility for our own lives, our own communities, and our own planet. It's
Exactly.
about understanding that the future is not predetermined. It's a canvas waiting to be painted by our collective choices and actions.
And that's a powerful message, isn't it? It's a call to action, an invitation to step into our power and create a future that aligns with our highest values and aspirations.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the esoteric interpretations of Agenda 2030. It's been a fascinating and thought-provoking journey, exploring the potential for both positive and negative outcomes
Yeah.
and emphasizing the importance of discernment, critical thinking, and individual empowerment.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure exploring these unconventional perspectives with you.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody. We hope it sparked your curiosity and given you some new perspectives to ponder. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay empowered.